Hey everyone, I'm Kate from Black Hat Books, and I just wanted to go through some of my favorites from 2023 and then talk about some reading goals and channel goals going into the new year. So 2023 was a really good reading year for me. I actually ended up reading 211 books, which is by far the most I've read in any year, probably ever. Gonna be a hard goal to beat. Probably not actually even really a goal to beat it. Of those 211 books, 109 were volumes of manga or light novels. The rest were regular novels. There were a few graphic novels, and then some more like picture books or like coffee table type books. So not necessarily like novels for the remainder. It was split pretty evenly. I just counted, literally. I think there's 17 favorites. I have them sort of organized. We'll start with kids' books, or like kids' books, middle grade. So I read The Complete Brambly Hedge, which is just this adorable. It's actually a series. This is the bind up. I think there's 7 books? 8 books. And it's basically just this little community of mice, and they have these beautiful illustrations, but it's just really whimsical, and like they have picnics and they do things in the summer, and one of them gets lost, so they go look for her in the fall or the winter. They go on adventures and everything. It's just really whimsical, and it was just a really nice time. So the next one is The Girl Who Drank the Moon by Kelly Barnhill. There's a city that is on the edge of the forest, and every year, they've kind of been tricked into thinking that the witch in the forest is evil. Each year they sacrifice a child, and usually she takes the baby and takes it across the forest to a town. She'll basically place the abandoned babies with different families in that town. One year she makes a mistake and feeds the baby Moonlight, turns her into a magic being, basically. The girl's name is Luna, and as her 13th birthday approaches, she starts having magical abilities, and they have consequences. So she sets off on a journey to find a solution for these consequences, and there's a swamp monster and a tiny dragon. I feel like a lot of really good middle grade and books geared more towards kids are actually really timeless. And this is kind of what this felt like for me. It did win a Newbery Medal. It was a really great read for the year. I think I'm going to go into graphic novels and manga next. So my favorite graphic novel was Squire. This is written and illustrated by 2 Arab Americans. One is Palestinian American, one is Jordanian American. I believe the illustrator is Jordanian and the writer is Palestinian. And it's about this girl named Isa, and she is part of a colonized people. One of the only ways that she can get full citizenship is to become a knight of the empire or the kingdom that colonized her people. She enlists in a Squire training program, and she makes some friends and learns a lot, but she also starts to realize that everything is not always as it seems. So she hides her heritage in order to blend in a little bit better and makes friendships, learns a lot, but she starts to realize that the way the kingdom that conquered her people operates and their mentality around a lot of things is not necessarily how she thinks, and it puts not just her people, but also a lot of her new friends in danger. It's a really good take on how to stay loyal to yourself and your heritage despite being told otherwise. And the art is also beautiful. It's just So it's just well done all the way around. Getting into some manga, I just pulled some random volumes of 3 of the favorite series that I read this year. I read Full Metal Alchemist. I had watched this, both the original version in the early 2000s, and then Full Metal Alchemist Brotherhood several times at this point. Brotherhood follows the manga way more. It's a favorite anime, and Elle from Elliot Brooks also really likes the anime and the manga. Well, I assume she likes both, but she was doing a reread. I don't think it was last year. I think it was 2022. I don't know. Time is an illusion. I got, I think, a first volume for Christmas of 2022. So I read the full series last year. And for people who don't know, it's a story about Alphonse and Edward Elric, who are brothers, and they live in a world where alchemy exists, and there is not a spoiler, their mother dies, and they commit the ultimate taboo of trying to bring their mother back to life through alchemy. As a result, Ed loses, I think, an arm, and then Alphonse loses his entire body. And in order to get Alphonse back, Ed attaches his soul to a suit of armor, and as a result of that, loses a leg, I think. It might be swapped, but... So there's this thing called the Philosopher's Stone. Ed decides to become a state alchemist in order to get access to more research funding and documents and data and information in order to get their bodies back to normal. They follow a bunch of leads to different places in their search for this Philosopher's Stone, and it just follows the 2 brothers, and they meet this guy and, several other people along the way. It was already a favorite anime, so I knew I was gonna love the manga as well, but it's just as funny and hard-hitting and everything in the manga as it is in the show. Same thing with Haikyuu. I had already watched the anime for this. I decided that I wanted to start reading the manga, particularly after I really enjoyed reading Full Metal. This is about a high school volleyball team that the team was really good in the past, but they aren't as good any longer. The main characters remember when it was good, and so they were like, oh, well, yeah, I have to go to this high school to in order to play really good volleyball. It's kind of the story of all these first-year high school students who go and help revive the team. It's just as funny in manga format as it is in the show. Like, in the first volume, there's a scene where they knock the vice principal's toupee off, and it's just as funny in book format as it is in anime format. So yeah, I've been really enjoying that. Again, it was already a favorite, so it was gonna continue to be a favorite. A new favorite, however, is Spy Family. This was also an Elliot Brooks recommendation. My husband and I really love this. It's so goofy. So this is about a man who's a spy, and he has to go undercover as a family man in order to get close to a guy on the opposite side. He recruits a wife, but she's an assassin. And then they adopt a daughter, but they don't know that she's a telepath. And then they have a dog who can see the future. It just is really goofy. It's a lot of fun. It's really fun. Another series, this is a light novel, but I picked up Heaven Official's Blessing. Again, I watched the show first. I think the first season is on Netflix, but then both seasons are on Funimation. But I think they're still releasing the second season. I loved the story in the show, and I loved the art. Like, it's just stunning. It's just beautiful. So I was like, all right, well, I feel like I would get more out of the book. I watched the first season, and then I picked up the book, and I just rewatched the first season. Once I realized that the second season was coming out, I just went ahead and rewatched it. It's like 12 episodes or something, so it's not long at all. I rewatched it, and it's still as beautiful the first time. The first season does cover everything in the first volume. It seems like they'll do a season per volume, which means that there's going to be 8 seasons. It follows, I'm going to try and pronounce these as close to correctly as possible. If I don't, please forgive. So it starts with Shalon ascending to the heavenly realm for the 3rd time, and he causes a disturbance in order to repay some of the damage that he did. He goes off to look into a problem in the mortal world. It follows that adventure, and then there's another issue that comes up, and he goes to look into that. On the way, he meets a character named Sanlang, and Sanlang travels with him and stays with him and helps him out and all this stuff. I've read the series, and the series was just, 1,000,000 out of 10. Yeah. If you are a more visual person, I would definitely check out the show because the art and the animation is beautiful. By the same author, I read Grandmaster Demonic Cultivation. This one is only 5 volumes. There's the light novel, and then there's the comic. The comic is still coming out. The light novels are complete. I've read the comics, but I was like, I don't really know what's going on. Same with Heaven Official's Blessing. Having read this and having a little more detail, a little more background was really helpful. Another thing with both this and Heaven Official's Blessing that I noticed was the way the books are formatted. In terms of where they cut off. They cut off in the middle of a scene almost, but definitely in the middle of an arc. And so it was just formatted kind of oddly. And I don't know if that's a translation thing or just kind of how they chose to do it. Once you get past that, it doesn't really matter. So this one is about Wei Wuxian. Wei Wuxian was once a really outstanding cultivator of his generation. Through the horrors of war and infighting between different factions of different cultivator families and groups, he decides to try demonic cultivation. He was really powerful, so everyone really wanted him to fight for them, but once the war was ending, they were like, oh, you're too dangerous to live, and so they killed him. The start of the series is that he is resurrected into the body of someone who sacrifices his soul, basically killed himself, so content warning for suicide. So he's resurrected into this new body, but in order to stay in the body, he has to fulfill their final wish, which is basically just to get revenge on abusive family members. So he does that, and then he can kind of just go off and do his thing again. Other events ensue, and so he meets his former rival, Lan Wangji, in his new body, and it gets kind of tied up in events, and so he's forced to travel with Lan Wangji and kind of be around him. The story of kind of how he came to be killed in the first place and all of those events, and then how maybe they weren't actually really rivals in reality. I did forget to say that both of these are boy love. This one inspired the live action show called The Untamed. I think it's also on Netflix. This one was also definitely more explicit on page. The other one is more just hinted at. So the next favorite is an art book. It's the One Piece Color Wall Compendium, Water 7 to Paramount War. It's all of the art, the color art from the manga, and I think other not manga situations. There's some from the movies and things that come out in between. I do think these get released in smaller volumes and then bound up in a hardback book. But this is, one of the pieces. I hope I don't get in trouble for that. There's big fold out pieces and on each end. This is one of my favorite animes of all time. Probably is just the favorite. But this is Water 7 is one of my favorite arcs. It's just really fun to get to sit there and see all of the color art and just like all the different scenes of all your favorite characters. The next one is also an art book, and it's the art of Howl's Moving Castle, the Studio Ghibli movie. And it has a bunch of just like sketches from all the different scenes, and then like big like still shots from scenes, and then like big detail spreads. This is my favorite Ghibli movie. It's just really cool to like see all the different prep and stuff that went into the movie. I have 9 novels. I'm gonna try and get through this pretty quick. So I read The Red Palace by June Her. This reads like a K-drama. So this is about a nurse named Hyun. She stumbles across a crime scene where a bunch of other nurses are killed. And so she works with a police officer named Ojin. A lot of the evidence starts to point toward the crown prince. And so they have to work together to find evidence and that sort of thing. I hadn't read from this author before. I found her on Instagram, I think. This was a really fun time. It's YA. It's definitely a little more YA, but, well, not more YA, because it's murder. It's really well done. And if you like K-dramas, then, and mystery ones at that, read this. And she did take this from historical events. I do believe her other 2 novels that have already come out are also based on historical events. She has a new one coming out this year. That one is also based on historical events. They're all different time periods. Definitely an interesting way to kind of learn about some Korean history. So I reread Gods and Men by Barbara Kloss. This one is about a girl named Sable, and she has magic, and you're not supposed to have magic in the 5 provinces. She's a princess from one of the southern lands. When she's like 8 or 9, she accidentally stops her baby sister's heart and kills her sister, and she is sent off to the north, kind of like put into exile by her family because she might be killed if she has magic, or if people find out that she has magic. And so she's sent off to the north, where she lives for the next 10 years or so. The north is like really, like where she lives is like really gloomy. It's like the land where other people who've been exiled, like thieves and other criminals, are forced to live. So it's a pretty cutthroat place. Something happens, and her mentor that she's been living with for the last 10 years dies. And so she's forced to team up with someone who recently arrived in her town. I don't know if town is the right, village maybe, but she's forced to flee with him. So they're hunted by like spirits of the dead, and like an old necromancer is coming back to life, and that sort of thing. This is on KU, and that's how I found it initially. I did go ahead and buy a copy when the trilogy was finished. I do think this is the best in this series, but they're still 4.5 stars, so they're pretty good. It's definitely a little more, I don't quite know that it's like enemies to lovers, but like she definitely doesn't trust him. He's definitely got some secrets. So that was a reread. It was just as good the second time. This one was not a reread. This is Tertial and Eleanor by Garth Nix. It is kind of a prequel to Sabriel. It follows the history of her parents and how they met and kind of their story. It was like a really nice way to like revisit the Old Kingdom without having to actually go back and reread. I was kind of craving a reread anyway. This was a nice way to like scratch that itch without going back and rereading. But it follows Tertial, who is like a person in waiting, and he goes and helps Eleanor when her home is attacked by the dead and her whole family dies and all that. Just how they met and got together, and yeah. So this is 10,000 Stitches by Olivia Atwater. This is the second book after Half a Soul. It's Half a Soul, 10,000 Stitches, and then Long Shadow. And they're all connected. That you can read them independently. They're all pretty standalone-ish. One of the main characters in this book is someone that you met in Half a Soul. There's not too much crossover, so you don't really need to read either of them. So this follows Effie, who is a maid in an English household, and she is in love with a gentleman who is beyond her station. She stumbles into the fairy realm of Lord Blackthorn. He bargains with her, and all she has to do is sew 10,000 stitches onto his favorite jacket. There's definitely a lot about class and privilege and that sort of thing. It's kind of like it has like traditional like fairy tale vibes, but also kind of looks into some deeper issues. Alright, so the next one is God Killer, and this is about a woman who is an actual god killer, and she goes around killing gods. There's been kind of a war against gods who they were really manipulative and would meddle in people's lives, often causing the end of people's lives. And so she goes around killing gods, and then she gets asked to help a girl whose life has been tangled with a god, and they ask her to help them come up with a solution to their problem, and she sets out on a journey with them to come up with a solution. It ends on a cliffhanger, so rude, but the sequel comes out in February? Also, this is under 300 pages. It's, how many pages? It's 288 pages, so if you want really short, really well written, really concise, no minced words, no purple prose or anything, really tightly plotted, this is it. Just read it. Same goes with the Luminaries. This one is 304 pages. So it's also really tightly plotted fantasy. And this one is YA. The God Killer is maybe adult, maybe YA. It fits both genres. It's probably more adult than YA. Oh yeah, no, there's definitely sex in it, so it's adult. So this is YA. This follows Winnie Wednesday, and she lives in a town that borders a magical forest, and each family is responsible for fighting the monsters in the forest each day of the week, hence Wednesday. 4 years prior, her father was accused of being a member of a rival magical society, and so she and her mom and her brother were kind of exiled, forced to like the edge of the family. So they, like, her mom was the head hunter, and so she now works at a diner, and like she lost all of her friends and all this sort of thing. And her dad disappeared. Her brother like can't get a promotion at work, and all these other consequences. And so when she turns 16, she has the chance to become a hunter and kind of restore her family's status within the community. She goes and passes all the trials and everything. But then people, like, I loved this because it just felt so accurate as to how like a 16-year-old would think, and like how you would think even as an adult. Like after she passed these trials, she, like, all these people start being her friends again, and she's like, where were you the last 4 years? You being nice to me now doesn't change the way that you've treated me these past 4 years. Like I was invisible, or like I was less than. In order to like train for all these different trials, she teams up with her ex-best friend named Jay Friday, and he's kind of like not really the bad boy, like he's not that bad. He like skips school, and he's in a band and everything. So it follows like her through the trials and like afterwards and everything. And then the sequel is The Hunting Moon, and that one was just as good. They're not unpredictable, but they are so fun and so well written that it doesn't matter. It was great. Another really fun one was Bonesmith. So this follows Ren, and she is a bonesmith. The book starts with her having to like pass a trial to become like a fully fledged bonesmith. Something happens and she basically doesn't pass the trial. This all happens like really, really quickly, so it's not really a spoiler. She's banished to the border wall. The wall was put in place to protect the rest of the country from ghost smiths who could control ghosts and that sort of thing. And something happened and it resulted in a bunch of deaths and everything. She's kind of just sent there as like, you've kind of been banished type of post. One day the prince comes for a visit and she's told to like get in his good graces and everything. And so they go on a tour of the other side of the wall. And while they're on the other side of the wall, he gets kidnapped. And she's like, all right, well, I have to go after him. She teams up with one of the kidnappers who was betrayed by the other men in his group. And they team up to go track down the kidnapped prince. Again, not unpredictable, but also super fun. And Ren is so great because she's like kind of impulsive and just like doesn't always think before she speaks or before she acts, and like watching her kind of come to the realization that the worth that her family places on her is not necessarily how she should feel about herself. There's a lot of like growth that she goes through throughout the book. The sequel to that comes out, I think, in August. So I'm really excited for that. Another favorite was Emily Wilde's Encyclopedia of Fairies. This is by Heather Fawcett. It follows Emily Wilde, and she is a professor, and she researches the fae, and not like the sexy fae, like the kind that you bargain with, like the kind that you find more in like folklore and fairy tales. And so she goes up to this northern island to research like one last fae group before she puts her encyclopedia together. And while she's there, her academic rival named Wendell Bamblebee arrives. She thinks he's the bane of her existence, but she also recognizes that he is really good at interacting with people, where she is very much less so. And he just kind of places himself in her house too. He's just so funny, and he honestly reminds me a little bit of Howl from Howl's Moving Castle, where he's just like a little bit dramatic and a little bit like he's very focused on his appearance and like has to have things just so and everything. So he gives me those kind of vibes, but he's also really goofy and just like loves kind of egging her. He loves like pushing her buttons and everything. So he's just funny. He's actually really smart. Like he actually knows what he's talking about, but he definitely uses some of his charm to get other people to do his work for him. Underneath it all, he actually knows what he's talking about. And he helps her with her research, both with like the townsfolk and then like looking for the fae that she's trying to find. The sequel, I think, comes out this month. Might already be out. I don't know. But I'm really excited. This is also written in like a journal format. So if you like that kind of thing. The final book is actually a sci-fi. It's The Long Way to a Small Angry Planet by Becky Chambers. This was just like really cozy. It was kind of episodic. So it follows a group of beings on this spaceship called the Wayfarer, and they are hired to do this job that is kind of dangerous. They're going to get paid incredibly well, and so it follows them. There's a new member on their team. It follows them like as they get to know her, as she gets to know them, and it was like an extra cozy Firefly. I haven't read the rest of the series yet, but that's kind of one of the goals for 2024. Alright, so those were some of my 2023 favorites. Let me know if you enjoyed any of those, and I will see you guys in the next one.